Hello. Don't forget to like and subscribe before starting the video. Who is Franklin Pierce? Franklin Pierce was the 14th President of the United States, serving from 1853 to 1857. He was born in Hillsborough, New Hampshire in 1804 to a prominent family. His father, Benjamin Pierce, served as the governor of New Hampshire, and his mother, Anna Kendrick Pierce, was known for her charitable work in the community. Pierce attended Bowdoin College in Maine, where he graduated 5th in his class. Pierce's political career began in the New Hampshire legislature, where he served from 1829 to 1833. He was then elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, where he served from 1833 to 1837. He later served in the U.S. Senate from 1837 to 1842, before leaving politics to focus on his law practice. Pierce's presidency is often overshadowed by the events that followed it, including the Civil War and Reconstruction. However, his presidency was a critical time in American history, marked by significant political and social changes. One reason why Pierce is an important historical figure is his role in the escalating tensions between the North and South over the issue of slavery. His support for the controversial Kansas-Nebraska Act, which allowed for the expansion of slavery into new territories, helped to further inflame the growing tensions that would eventually lead to the Civil War. I chose to make a video about Pierce because I believe he is an often overlooked figure in American history. While his presidency may not be as well known as those of other presidents, he played a significant role in shaping the political and social landscape of the United States in the mid-19th century. In this video, I will provide an overview of Pierce's life and career, including his early years, his presidential campaign and election, and his time in office. I will also discuss the major issues and controversies surrounding his presidency, including his stance on slavery and his foreign and domestic policies. Franklin Pierce was born on November 23, 1804, in Hillsborough, New Hampshire, to a family with a long history of public service. His father, Benjamin Pierce, was a Revolutionary War veteran who served as the governor of New Hampshire, while his mother, Anna Kendrick Pierce, was known for her charitable work in the community. Pierce's early education was influenced by his father, who was a strong advocate for education. Pierce attended private schools in New Hampshire before enrolling at Bowdoin College in Maine, where he graduated 5th in his class in 1824. After college, Pierce returned to New Hampshire and began studying law. In 1827, he was admitted to the bar and began practicing law in Hillsborough. It was during this time that Pierce became involved in politics, initially through his work with the Democratic Party in New Hampshire. In 1829, at the age of 24, Pierce was elected to the New Hampshire legislature, where he quickly made a name for himself as a skilled orator and politician. He was re-elected to the legislature in 1830 and served as the Speaker of the House from 1832 to 1833. In 1833, Pierce was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, where he served until 1837. During his time in Congress, Pierce was a strong supporter of President Andrew Jackson's policies, including his opposition to the Second Bank of the United States. Pierce was also a strong advocate for states' rights and a strict interpretation of the Constitution. After leaving Congress in 1837, Pierce returned to New Hampshire and resumed his law practice. He briefly served in the state militia during the Aroostook War, a boundary dispute between Maine and Canada, in 1839. However, he largely stayed out of politics until his election to the U.S. Senate in 1837. In the Senate, Pierce continued to advocate for states' rights and worked to expand American influence in Latin America. However, he also faced criticism from some Democrats for his support of the Whig Party's proposal to establish a national bank. Pierce resigned from the Senate in 1842 and returned to New Hampshire, where he focused on his law practice and family life. In 1852, Franklin Pierce was nominated as the Democratic Party's candidate for president. The Democratic National Convention was held in Baltimore, Maryland, and Pierce was chosen as a compromise candidate after several rounds of voting failed to produce a clear winner. Pierce was seen as a relatively unknown candidate with moderate views on slavery, making him an appealing choice for a party that was struggling to maintain unity on the issue. During his campaign, Pierce focused on national unity and economic prosperity, while largely avoiding the controversial issue of slavery. His opponent, Whig Party candidate Winfield Scott, was a decorated war hero, but his reputation was tarnished by his perceived association with the unpopular Compromise of 1850 and the Fugitive Slave Act, which allowed for the capture and return of escaped slaves to their owners. The election was marked by low voter turnout, with only about 60% of eligible voters participating. Despite this, Pierce won a decisive victory, winning 27 of the 31 states and receiving 254 electoral votes to Scott's 42. Pierce's popular vote margin was relatively narrow, with just over 50% of the vote compared to Scott's 44%. Pierce's inauguration in 1853 was a lavish affair, with a parade and celebrations throughout Washington, D.C. In his inaugural address, Pierce emphasized the need for national unity and pledged to uphold the Constitution and the laws of the land. However, Pierce's presidency was soon overshadowed by the growing tensions over slavery and the question of states' rights. While Pierce had sought to avoid the issue during his campaign, he was quickly forced to confront it as president, particularly with the passage of the Kansas-Nebraska Act in 1854. This controversial legislation, which Pierce supported, allowed for the expansion of slavery into new territories and helped to further inflame the growing divisions between North and South. Franklin Pierce's presidency was marked by a number of significant accomplishments and failures. On the foreign policy front, Pierce sought to expand American influence in Asia, sending a naval expedition to Japan in 1853 that led to the opening of trade relations between the two countries. Pierce also faced tensions with Britain and Spain over territorial disputes in Central America, but he was able to resolve these conflicts peacefully through diplomacy. In terms of domestic policy, Pierce was known for his attempts to compromise on the issue of slavery. He supported the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which allowed for the expansion of slavery into new territories and was highly controversial, but he also sought to maintain the delicate balance between slave and free states in the Union. Pierce also worked to modernize the military, increasing funding for weapons and equipment and expanding the size of the Army and Navy. However, Pierce's presidency was also marked by a number of controversies and criticisms. His support for the Kansas-Nebraska Act helped to ignite the Bleeding Kansas Crisis, a violent conflict between pro-slavery and anti-slavery forces in the Kansas Territory. Pierce's handling of this crisis was widely criticized, with many accusing him of siding with pro-slavery forces and exacerbating the tensions between North and South. Pierce's presidency was also marred by personal tragedy. He and his wife, Jane, lost all three of their children to illness, which left Pierce deeply depressed and struggling to cope with his grief. This personal struggle may have affected his ability to effectively lead the country during a time of great turmoil and division. Despite these controversies and personal struggles, Pierce's presidency had a lasting impact on American history. His support for the Kansas-Nebraska Act helped to fuel the growing tensions over slavery that would eventually lead to the Civil War. Pierce's efforts to expand American influence in Asia paved the way for the United States' later involvement in the Pacific region. And his attempts to modernize the military laid the groundwork for the military advancements that would prove crucial in the coming years. While Pierce is often overshadowed by the more prominent figures of his time, his presidency remains an important chapter in American history. In conclusion, we've covered a lot of ground in this video about Franklin Pierce, including his early life and career, his presidential campaign and election, and his presidency itself. We've discussed his major accomplishments and failures, his foreign and domestic policy initiatives, and the controversies and criticisms that surrounded his time in office. In my opinion, Franklin Pierce was a complex figure whose presidency was defined by both significant achievements and major missteps. While he was successful in expanding American influence in Asia and modernizing the military, his support for the Kansas-Nebraska Act and his handling of the Bleeding Kansas Crisis were deeply divisive and contributed to the growing tensions over slavery that would eventually lead to the Civil War. Pierce was also personally affected by tragedy during his time in office, which may have impacted his ability to lead effectively. Overall, Pierce's presidency was a critical moment in American history, and his legacy is still being debated today. Whether you agree with his policies or not, there's no denying that his time in office had a lasting impact on the country and its future direction. I encourage you to leave any questions or comments you have about Pierce and his presidency in the comments section below. Thank you for watching, and be sure to subscribe for more videos on American history and politics. Thank you for watching this video. If you found it informative, please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel for more content like this in the future.